Hello, everyone. Welcome to CXO Spice. CXO Spice is a platform for thought leaders to share their point of view on innovation and explain how to make it happen in the real world. I'm your host, Helen Yu. Today's topic is spend management intelligence. Our special guest is Chris Juneau, SVP of Product Marketing, SAP Concur. Hello, Chris. It's such a pleasure to have you on CXO Spice today. You and I have a bit of history. When I was an operating executive, you were a client of mine. And
Yep.
we also had a chance to host one of your colleagues about a couple years ago. So delighted to reconnect and have you here to share your perspective with our audience today. But Chris, let's begin by having you introduce yourself and your current role at SAP Concur.
Sure, happy to. And Helen, it's great to see you again, have the opportunity to talk to you. Yes, again, Chris Juneau, I head up global product marketing. So work closely with our product engineering with regard to overall market strategy and so forth. And I've been doing this for about 25 plus years. And much of that time at Concur and then SAP Concur, I've worked outside of the US, opening up new markets in Europe and Asia Pacific. So again, it's great to join you and share some thoughts with your viewers.
I feel like I've known you that long, Chris.
It's been a long time. I
I
know, I know.
know.
We do need to get together as we were chatting, as we were prepping. So look forward to seeing you in 3D the next
I
opportunity we
know,
get.
absolutely. Chris, with your current role, you've had a front row seat to see how organizations are rethinking spend management given today's economic climate. Right? With rising costs, constant change, it feels like a perfect moment to explore how companies can gain more control and agility. So how an integrated approach to travel, expense, and invoice management help organizations optimize cost control while maintaining agility, especially during economic uncertainty?
Great question, Helen. And during times of uncertainty, actually, we thrive for this very reason. Because by integrating travel, expense, and invoice management, you break down the silos across whether it be the finance organization or across the broader organization. And it allows organizations to see spending in near real time. And therefore, they can respond to shifts in the marketplace or inflationary pressures, in terms, especially in regard to T&E, and therefore control costs with greater precision. Second, we just earlier this year released a CFO Insights report, and one of the results that stood out from that report for me was 61% of finance leaders see inaccurate forecasting as their greatest challenge when controlling costs. Of course, you or I would always say, well, if you can't see it, you can't control it. And so, and now we believe it's another one of those opportunities to gain that control because of the economic and geopolitical uncertainty. So that's going to make forecasting and cost control, cash management even harder than previous years.
That's interesting, Chris. As a matter of fact, I always feel like, I started my career as a financial analyst. We used to do forecasts all the time, right? It's
Sure.
impossible to forecast anything accurately today, right? Constantly changing. But, integration often works hand in hand with automation and AI. Many leaders I work with are asking how AI and automation can go beyond efficiency and become true differentiators. So what have you seen? How are automation and AI used to drive operational efficiency, compliance, and competitive advantage? What challenges have you encountered in adopting these technologies?
Great question. I'll share Concur and SAP Concur's own story, as well as point of view from our customers. So we've been infusing our solutions with AI for over 10 plus years.
Mm.
And originally, the primary driver at the time was delivering greater efficiency. As an example, many companies outsource their expense report auditing to SAP Concur. Our business was growing so fast, we could not hire auditors fast enough and train them to do that work on behalf of our customers. So we said, look, there has to be a better way. And we turned to machine learning
Mhm.
and then AI to drive greater efficiency in our operation. But what it also did, it reduced our turnaround times, which gave the end users a better experience. As we were talking offline about, hey, people want to get reimbursed for their expense report. And so we're able to drive efficiency with their own operations, but also deliver faster response times and enable organizations to pay employees faster. The second is with our CFO's survey that I mentioned, a significant stat emerged, and that is 38% of CFOs now are treating manual processes as a top internal challenge. And this compares to 1% in 2024. So think about 1% to 38%. And we believe that this is primarily being driven by the value CFOs and others are seeing in AI to drive greater operational efficiency. And already in that same survey, 57% of financial professionals we surveyed said they're already using AI for general tasks, such as generating emails, transcribing documents, summarizing meetings. And so they see the benefits already, and now they're looking across what other manual, tedious processes uh, could I automate and infuse with AI. And the last stat, well, not the last stat, there'll be many more stats I'll cite, but they also 33% cited compliance by employees with company policies as also a top challenge when controlling costs. So you see the two things here: manual processes, and I need to have compliance, and therefore can I do both? And I think the answer is yes. And and that's where AI comes in. And I think now ultimately the challenge, as you stated in your question, in terms of making the AI real and making it work, is ultimately begins with the data. And again, since I joined Concur in 2001, excuse me, it's always been about the data. How can we
Mhm.
minimize keystrokes? How can we minimize human error? How can we capture digital information that exists, combine that in a way, and then put that to use? Well, that's clearly the foundation of how power AI solutions are powered. Ultimately, beginning with the data.
Mhm. You raised quite a few important points here, Chris. I'm so glad to see the CFOs finally turn around the corner because they're
Right?
typically risk averse, as you know, right?
Yes.
And 38% of them feel that it's important. That's really a high percentage compared to where we were a year ago. You've highlighted both value and challenges. That naturally connects to decision making because
Mm-hmm.
leaders must weigh both cost and employee impact when choosing how to use these tools. And thanks so much for sharing how what's happening within SAP itself, right? Having those experience will help you build a product that really add value to your customer base. So speaking of that, what strategies enable business leaders to make data-driven decisions that balance cost savings with employee productivity and satisfaction?
I think as CFOs continue or finance leaders continue to explore AI-powered solutions to automate financial processes, to get greater forecasting and control, collaboration with the CHR and the CIOs, along with your partners, is critical. That they can't go it alone. Um, I remember the days in the early days, many times we were engaging with the customers considering automating their expense reporting at the time, and we're typically selling to finance professionals, and many times they would say, "Oh, now don't talk to the IT team because they'll just say they have other priorities. Just we'll work it through with us." And so I remember those days, and now whenever we're talking to either a customer or a potential customer, we say, "Please." Go talk to your IT department. Go talk to your CHRO because you're going to have to get the data. Go talk to your CIO about how this integrates into your landscape. So that's first thing we do is like as finance leaders are trying to solve these concrete business challenges, we're saying you can't do it alone. And then second, uh, as finance leaders approach this in collaboration with CHROs and the CIOs, um, it's important that they evaluate their technology providers and partners to ensure that their AI investments are done responsibly, delivers relevant results and reliable results. Um, and again, that takes that collaboration, and it's not one size fits all to determine how best to make those investments and to choose the right technology partners.
Mhm. Those are great points, right? Can't do it alone, and then being responsible and reliable partner to your business team or cross-functional teams. So thank you for saying that. But underlying these decisions are evolving regulations and ongoing change, factors that cannot be ignored either, which brings me to compliance and risks, right? How do
Mhm.
organizations adapt to evolving business needs, regulatory requirements, while maintaining compliance and minimizing risks?
Great question, and a complex one. Uh, First, the good news is finance leaders are realizing the success that they're experiencing AI, and especially in risk reduction and financial forecasting. So the groundwork is already laid. Uh, the risk that all have to look out for, it's not ever a one and done uh, situation. I in the old days when I joined Concur, we were primarily an on-premise software company,
Mhm.
and many times companies would implement, and their implementation would remain fairly static, and so forth, because it was either costly to implement or to modify their configuration. And of course, cloud brought the ability to deliver continuous innovation and constantly optimize and and revisit the configuration to deal with the new regulatory requirements or compliance requirements. So we tell our customers today, it's like, yes, we are cloud, we're delivering innovation, but together, it's not a one and done. We never configure the system and you're done. It's a constant vigilance to what are the changes out there in the regulatory environment, which we can bring to our clients and our clients bring to us. Uh, and constantly asking ourselves, why did we configure it this way? What problem are we solving then? Is that problem still relevant today? Or can I do without this audit rule? Or can I change my workflow? That we're 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 fast approaching a dynamic environment, and technology will enable organizations to stay abreast of emerging regulatory and compliance issues. But it's that vigilance to and that willingness to constantly revisit, how's my automated process configured? Is it still configured to meet the needs of today and the future needs versus being set and done? Because it will never be set and done, no longer in today's environment.
Well, that's such an important point, Chris. As you become a strategic partner to your clients along the journey, and that really becomes really, like you growing together, scaling together. That's what we want, where we want to be, right? But it becomes even more complex when you extend operations globally. Because what are the key considerations for navigating the complexities of global operations, such as managing multiple currencies, tax regulations, and supplier agreements?
Well, Helen, as I stated in my intro, I spent much of my time working outside of the US, and the variances across countries with regard to VAT recovery, with regard to VAT or GST or other taxes, continues to evolve. And each country has its own set of complex tax laws, excuse me, and regulations. And if you don't properly manage a few things could happen. It could lead to costly losses or missed savings opportunities. Um, and that complexity, I believe, is going to continue to proliferate. Protectionist trade policies, roiling headlines and so forth. And as I love to say, you and I both travel. When you're checking out of that hotel and you see resort tax, hotel tax, convention center tax. Everyone loves to tax the traveler that doesn't live in that city because they don't vote and so forth. So, with all that being said, it requires cooperation, as I was stating earlier, both with our customers, finance leaders, in some cases, their tax advisors within their organization, and ourselves. And together, we're constantly monitoring in regulatory requirements, or changes in reporting requirements, or changing in. For instance, in some countries now introducing different value-added tax
Mhm.
percentages based on alcohol, if alcohol is included or not included, and so forth, which creates complexity in how companies are trying to recover fat, as an example. So it requires a constant vigilance on both our sides to stay on top of the ever-changing regulatory environment.
Totally, Chris. One thing, a lesson I learned, you can never look at the hotel nightly rate on the surface, right? You have to know the total cost, and sometimes it could be double and triple, depends on where you're going. Um,
Absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely.
It's interesting, these global considerations also depends on how well departments work together. You actually mentioned, I quote you to say you can't do this alone, right? Finance, IT,
Yes.
HR are increasingly aligned today in ways we didn't see before. So how is cross-functional collaboration between or among finance, IT, and HR improving to address priorities like cybersecurity, ESG, and digital transformation? What impact has this had on resilience and growth?
Uh, great question. And for this survey, we purposely, previous years, we primarily interviewed finance leaders and so forth. But we were seeing this change in the landscape and said we need to expand the personas that we're also talking to, and that's led to the HR and IT roles being included. And fascinating results is 50% of finance leaders and 53% of IT leaders believe the primary responsibility for driving progress on cybersecurity, as an example, should be shared between finance and IT leaders. Um, and second, finance leaders, also 50% of them said they plan to adapt growth initiatives to also align with evolving cybersecurity landscape. So whether together both these roles clearly identified that hey we cannot do it alone, um, that and even though many of us would love to say I own this, it's like to own it and be successful you need to collaborate. And so we see both these different groups recognizing that they must work together to prevent downside risks, but also in the cost savings. And earlier in that report, CFO said, I am looking to drive cost savings, not for cost savings sakes, but also to fuel my company's growth. I'm going to self-fuel that growth uh, by driving cost savings.
Wow, I mean, that's music to my ears, right? You talk about 50% of finance leaders, 51% of IT leaders both think that cybersecurity is a shared responsibility. Thanks God
Right?
that's happening, right? Finally, it's about time. So when collaboration is in place, it lays the foundation for empowering employees directly. This really links to thoughtful automation, right? SAP is
Mhm.
talking about for a long time. So, in what ways does thoughtful automation empower employees and improve business processes from day-to-day operations to strategic decision making?
Great question. And when we talk of thoughtful automation, it's really trying to, you know, drive efficiency, but also empower employees by leveraging technology as well as human expertise in the right way. And as we've spoke previously, there's an opportunity, especially with the infusion of AI into automation technologies such as travel expense and invoice processing, that the trade-off between driving greater compliance and efficiency versus the user's experience that trade-off can potentially be severed. The example I would give in the early days, uh, how organizations typically drive compliance, so let's say in their expense reporting process. Oh, I need more audit roles. Oh, I need a different workflow step if this would occur, or I need additional approvers. All of that for for all that, you're maybe driving greater compliance, but you're not driving greater efficiency. Because with additional rules, additional workflow steps, it's adding steps into the process. And then third, it's detracting from the user experience. Managers potentially being involved in approvals that they previously hadn't been, and so forth. But now with AI, you have the ability to say, hey, I can drive greater compliance and potential visibility automatically without involving the end users,
Mhm.
without involving the managers, and so forth. And so you have a chance to break that trade-off. And uh, as an example, we have two solutions. One is called Expense It, which captures receipts either you upload or with your smartphone and so forth. Captures relevant information, infers other information that potentially should be on the receipt, like where you are, location, and so forth, and does that in a way to relieve the traveler from keying that information. As I was saying, we've always been on the on the quest for that digital information to minimize the keystrokes, and we found some interesting work. We thought we're just benefiting the traveler. We said expenses is great, it's making it easy, no more faxing of receipts in years ago and so forth. But when we looked at the data, something curious happened. The fact that with Expensify and AI being applied, uh, 14 on average, without Expensify, 14% of expense reports are returned to a traveler
Mm,
because there was a data entry error. There's some issue. We found that for Expensify users, only 2% is returned.
mm,
So imagine that going from 14% to 2%. And we were doing this simply because we said, look, we're going to have better data. It's going to improve the traveler's experience. And it accomplished two things. Not only a better experience, drove greater efficiency because it's more accurate before submission. And therefore, the traveler gets paid faster. They're happier. Second, they're not dealing with the return. Oh, Chris, you've got the wrong date on your hotel tax itemization. Please correct. Instead, let the correction be done up front to drive that efficiency and drive the compliance and drive the user experience.
That's such a compelling example, Chris. I have been a long time user SAP Concur. I took it for granted until recently. I had to use another system for my travel expense reimbursement. It can be very painful when it takes 3 months to get your expense reimbursed. That's being said, it is such a great lens into today reality, right? You mentioned about AI improving employee or make employee or user experience more seamless is so critical. But I love to close our conversation by looking ahead because organizations also need to be ready for what's coming, right? So, how are organizations preparing for change and staying strong and aiming change and through those new technologies like AI messaging or integrated platforms?
Mhm. Clearly, it wouldn't be a podcast with you, Helen, or anyone if we weren't talking about AI or talking about agentic AI. The landscape, the technology, the large language models, and so forth is clearly advancing rapidly. Um, and the good news is AI finance leaders recognize that AI has already improved their decision making, and 94% of from our CFO Insights report said that they've already seen AI improve their decision making.
Did you say
And then
95,
73,
95%?
94%,
94, wow.
94%
Okay.
already. And then, I was surprised when I saw the data because I was expecting it's the classic, the hype curve and then the trough of disillusionment. I was expecting, where's the trough of disillusionment?
Yeah.
It's like, did we skip that? And then 73% said that it has positively impacted costs and risk reduction. So I clearly finance leaders and more broadly in organizations realize the benefit. Uh, I think that there's an opportunity to continue that. And I think finance leaders, along with in collaboration with their CIO counterparts, the CHROs, are going to continue to look for AI infused, and I'm using the word platform because
Mhm.
they also realize that, as we were talking earlier, that if I can break down the silos within my organization with regard to the data, then that rich data then powers these AI infused platforms. I can create that virtuous cycle,
Mm.
whether it be battling its cybersecurity inputs to AI generated insights, uh, enabling CFOs and financial decision makers to respond faster and make more data driven decisions is going to be key. But I think at the end of the day, to wrap on this, Helen, it's going to require not only to use the right tools,
Mhm.
but it's going to be that cross-functional collaboration between finance, IT, and HR to continue to drive that transformation, which AI-infused technologies is going to bring for maximum impact. I said, because as I look around, without giving specific names, it's the customers I talk to and I visit anywhere in the world is when I'm chatting and I'm meeting with them, and I see I have a different conversation when it's only just finance department in the room. The conversation is much more broad and robust when finance is in the room. Their their IT stakeholders are in the room, and the CHROs are in the room because it's about financial processes, ensuring they're implemented safely and securely by IT and are resilient. And then third, that employee experience, but also that employee data. And so you need everyone's eyes on this to saying for alignment to ultimately continue driving this flywheel of innovation that we're currently in.
I love that concept of flywheel innovation, right? It's just so vivid to think about employee experience in the center and then with everybody collaborating with each other to drive that optimal employee experience. So, Chris, this has been such a pleasure. And thanks again for sharing your insights on spend management intelligence. I learned so much from you, but here are four key takeaways from our conversation today. Number one, integrated spend management strengthens control and agility, right? When travel, expense, and invoice live in one ecosystem, leaders gain complete visibility into spending, especially the finance leaders, right? So that means better cost control and faster
Mhm.
agility, even in the face of economic uncertainty and global complexity. And then number two is that automation and AI drive efficiency, compliance, and resilience. Automation reduce errors and save time. I love an example you give. The error returned back to
Mhm.
people dropped from 14% to 2%. That's big, right? When AI really helps ensure compliance and also spot risk early. That challenge, the challenge is in managing adoption, integrating systems smoothly,
Yes.
keeping the employee experience simple. And number three is the data-driven insight empower smarter, balanced decision. Accurate real-time data helps leaders control costs while also improving employee satisfaction. It leads to faster reimbursement, better travel experiences, and more strategic choices overall. Lastly, right, you mentioned about this quite a few times, cross-functional collaboration fuels transformation and growth. The finance leader, IT leader, and HR leader are teaming up, right? I heard you said 53% finance leader and 51% IT leader think cybersecurity is a shared responsibility. And then
Mhm.
they also really teaming up for digital priorities and ESG and many other important priorities. So platforms, AI-infused platforms like SAP Concur make this collaboration easier and possible, strengthening resilience today and laying the groundwork for future growth. Chris, it's been a pleasure speaking with you as always, and thank you for sharing your insights and for showing how SAP Concur continues to partner with business to drive efficiency, compliance, and growth. I'm so pleased to hear you use your own platform to run your business, right? That speaks the volume of the power of your solution. So thank you as SAP Concur for sponsoring this episode of CXO Spice. And thank you everyone for joining us today. Stay hungry, stay bold, and stay grateful.